With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right, even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being with us here on Tactics, where speech isn't violence, tolerance isn't love, and disagreement isn't hate. Welcome to the program, and thank you for being with us, whether you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, however you're watching us. We certainly appreciate you being with us and making us a part of your busy day. As always, or at least for the past month now, we're going to go ahead and start with our coronavirus update, so we'll go ahead and switch over to the latest from the Alabama Department of Public Health, and you can see that right there, that there are 4,149 confirmed cases of the Wuhan flu here in the state of Alabama. We've done just under 35,000 tests. There are 75 deaths, getting dangerously close to 100, although the most recent projections that I've seen are estimating that the state of Alabama sees roughly 350, which of course is horrible. Just like any loss of life is horrible, but significantly less than the 10 to 20,000 they were originally predicting. So the fact that it is actually below the projections that they were expecting is also good. Hospitalizations also has increased to 525. Still roughly the same hospitalization rate, still floating around that 12% mark. Death rate likewise staying pretty close to that, just under 2% mark. So that puts us about, there's really not a whole lot of change. There's not a lot of shakeup. Of course, there are increases in the raw numbers, and there are increases in our number of cases, our number of deaths, but there was no one particular statistic that stuck out today, with one exception, and it's not so much that it stuck out, it's that it stuck out in comparison to a trend that we have been noticing, because you may notice that our new cases for today, it went up more than we were projecting here on this program, and it went up more than you would think looking at the raw data. So why the shift? Why did we see the new cases go up? There's a number of different possible explanations that I could give you. There's a number of different reasons that may or may not have played into it. One thing that it may be, and we're seeing sort of a lagging statistic when it comes to this, is in the couple of days after the weekend, all of this stuff goes at a lower rate than it typically does. Now, even though I know that, and even though I was aware of that going into the data yesterday, where I suggested maybe what has happened is Alabama has already peaked, it seems that that is not the case, and we'll look at some data in a chart to back that up here in a second. But the reason that that was a possibility is that even if you counted the weekend as part of a factor, there had been a trend that preceded last weekend that seemed to suggest that indeed that was what is going on. It does not appear that that is what is happening now. You may recall yesterday on the show, if you're watching, that I was predicting that the peak had actually already started and we were starting to level off, and then I added the disclaimer to hedge myself saying, but remember that this could all change tomorrow, and because the universe loves proving me wrong, here we are, and there you are. So I really do think that God sometimes intentionally puts me in a certain position to where I'm going to make predictions that turn out to not be true, because he loves keeping me humble, and he knows that I need it with my attitude. So I think that may be what's going on here. I don't think that God actually changed how many people got coronavirus just to prove a point to me. But you know what I'm saying, that based on the numbers that we have seen today, it appears as though that leveling off period has not happened. There may have been a hiccup in the numbers, but probably not a full-on plateauing effect, at least not like the one that I was describing could have been starting yesterday. That effect did not wind up coming to pass. So the weekend actually plays a pretty big role in that, and I think that that may have been affected. It has been fascinating to watch this, and this is not something specific to the state of Alabama, even though that's primarily the numbers that we have been covering. It is something that affects the entire nation. For whatever reason, new cases and deaths also trail during the weekend, which is fascinating for a number of reasons. If we were a society that was not doing social distancing, you would expect for those numbers to actually increase on the weekends, because that's when people are getting together, coming in contact with one another on a more regular basis, at least for the average person. Now, maybe you have a job where, I don't know, you're like a roadie for a concert, and so you would obviously come in contact with more people during the week than the weekends if you had that job, but you understand what I'm saying. For the average person, what we would expect if we were doing the normal thing and staying open and everybody was not necessarily social distancing, or if they were, they weren't doing it in the way that we are now, to the extreme levels that we are now. If that were the case, you would expect all of those things to actually increase on the weekends. It's not, which lends me to believe that what is actually happening is people are coming in contact more often with people during the week, and that would probably be because of the people that are having to work, that their job is still open, or maybe they have an essential job there that they have to go out and continue to work on this. So there's a number of explanations for it, but that seems to me to be the most plausible one, that the vast majority of people are taking this very seriously. They're not going out on the weekend. They're not having fun or breaking the stay-at-home protocols. What they are ultimately doing is, though, at least for the ones that are working, they're going to work. And that's where they're coming in contact with people. And that's the reason that we're seeing an increase in new cases nationwide during those days, and also why you are seeing a lull in the weekend. And that probably explains what was happening with the numbers yesterday. We just happened to have, as a matter of happenstance, a slow Thursday, and then followed by your normal weekend lull, which would be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then Monday we did the testing. Tuesday we still had a lull, and then today we finally got caught up, and more tests came back, and we're seeing a increase that is larger, significantly larger than the increases that we've had over the past few days. That seems to be what was happening here. One thing that I do find fascinating about this, and I have no explanation, I don't even have a theory, which if you've been watching me for a while, you know I've got a theory for everything. If I don't have a theory for something, then it's not because of a lack of trying. So I've got nothing on this one. This is just information that I'm throwing out to you. I don't really have anything to offer commentary on it, which I feel a little bad about because my whole job is offering commentary on the information, but here it goes. We also have a decrease in death rate on the weekend, which is really strange, because the fact that the new cases, whether it's at the point of infection or at the time where people would just go out and get tested, decreases on the weekend, that doesn't surprise anyone, or really shouldn't, because this thing is spread based on our behavior. If we're behaving in such a way that we're going to come in contact with more people, or at least more likely to do so, well, it would make sense that the numbers are a little different on the weekend than they are on the weekday. When you die, even with this thing, really shouldn't be affected by that. Because if you are to the point to where you're dying from this respiratory infection, why would your body not die on the weekend and die during the week? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so I got to be honest, guys, I'm stumped on this one. I don't know why it's that way, but that seems to be the way that it is. If you're looking nationwide, the vast majority of the cases happen Monday through Friday. There is a lull on deaths during the weekend, which is incredibly bizarre, but that's how it is. Now, I wanted to go ahead and address that primarily just to give you the idea of why the numbers may have been a little bit skewed. We may have been having just a particularly slow Friday and Monday followed up by having a, those 2 points of coincidence coinciding with the normal lull on the weekend made it appear as though, and we were on a very clear downward trajectory, that was the case. But if you will look at this graph right here, which is, again, confirmed cases in the state of Alabama, you will notice, and this is what I was talking about yesterday, that the curve seems to start to level off about 4 or 5 days ago, where you're seeing very little new cases overall. And then today it just starts shooting up at about a normal rate. So the news is not that it had some kind of giant exponential spike. The news is that the trend that we were seeing where it was starting to level off stopped. Because the number of new cases, in this case, 273, it's a big number. It's not the biggest one we've ever seen. It's not record-breaking. It's definitely in the top 5, but it's not, mind-boggling compared to what we've seen so far. As you can see from this graph, the thing that makes it weird is that it bucks the trend and returns essentially to what was normal about 4 or 5 days ago. So that's really the reason that we've been talking about it, and the reason that the numbers don't really match up with the trends that we've seen over the past few days. So definitely not our biggest day, but one that bucked that trend of not having as many new cases per day, and that would suggest that we have indeed not leveled off. Now, it is also possible, and I know this is, believe me, from a news person's standpoint, this is an incredibly frustrating way to do the news, to have to basically tell you every day, this is what I think it could mean, but I'm not sure, and I may be completely wrong tomorrow. It's not my ideal way of doing it either. It's just the only way that I know how to process this data and to tell it to you in a way that is honest, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm frustrated with the uncertainty as well. I just don't know a way around it. So here we go with the final graph, and this is looking at new cases per day. You will see that trend has been wildly disrupted to where we're seeing, because yesterday was, I believe, our fifth highest day for new cases. And you'll notice that it completely destroys that trend that we were on for the past 4 days, where it was going down incrementally every single day and returning to really numbers that we had not seen in some time. Now, it is possible, it is entirely possible, that this entire thing is a fluke. Today happens to be just a weird day where we had more than normal, and then it returns to a leveling pattern tomorrow. Possible. Unlikely. But possible. And so, even though I'm talking about the trend that I thought was coming that now evidently has been broken, it's also possible that I was right the first time, I'm wrong today. I know, it's a lot to hold in your head. But it's also possible that I was right the first time, that I'm wrong today in saying that trend has been incorrect, and we wind up following that pattern that we have for the past several days. Maybe that happens, I don't know, but I'm not going to count on it. And that's the thing, with any of the information that you're getting, regardless of where you're getting it from, if anybody is telling you this is what is going to happen, that would be somebody that I would advise you to avoid, because they're probably trying to make stuff up. Somebody like me that is trying to do this objectively and trying to be as honest as possible will tell you, this is the way that it seems like it's going, but we really just don't know. I will say this really quickly, though. Today actually marks 1 month since I started quarantining, because my grandfather's birthday was on the 14th. That was the last time I had left the apartment, at least. I've left to go out to my truck and get stuff, but other than that, actually leaving the house, going somewhere, I haven't done that yet. I am thinking about doing a special out on the town here in the next couple days, so keep your ear to the ground for that one. But it has been 1 month now since I've quarantined, and, just like anybody else, I'm starting to get a little stir crazy. I'm not exactly climbing the walls. I'm an introvert. And so I can keep myself entertained for a very long time. My parents used to joke all the time that if we just delivered the meals to his room, which of course they didn't, our family sat around the table and actually ate a meal most of the time, that if we just delivered food to his room and he had his own bathroom, we'd never see Caleb. That was the running joke in my house. And so I am better equipped to handle something like this than the average person. And that's especially true since with chemo a couple years ago, there were times where I would go 2, sometimes even 3 weeks without leaving the house, maybe with the exception of going to the cancer center. And so this is not something that would affect me more than the average person. In fact, I'm probably better prepared, better equipped, and better suited to handle something like this than the vast majority of the American people. And even now, I'm starting to get a little stir crazy. I mean, I'm starting to miss going out, hanging out with people. Of course, the big one, going to church, being in the fellowship of the saints, just going out to eat. I haven't been out to eat in an entire month now. I don't know that I've ever done that my entire life. Even as a little kid, my parents would take me out to eat, maybe once every week or something like that. And I haven't really even done that in a long time. So that being said, there is quite a bit of disruption that's going on in American society. And my question now is, how much longer can we take this? Because whether it's the state of Alabama or the American people as a whole, there's going to come a certain point. And I don't know if we'll open it up. And I know Lieutenant Governor Will Answorth has said that they're going to try to get the state ready to roll by May 1st. And I hope that that is the case. This thing winds up ending when the people decide that it's going to end. That's something that's very unique about America, is that ultimately, well, actually I say this, it is unique to America in a certain way, but there's a certain other way that it's not. Ultimately, the people are the one that lead, not the government, especially in America. And the reason I say that is there's some environmental factors here that are causing us to stay inside, to lock our doors, and to basically shelter in place, as the order would suggest. All of this stuff primarily happened before the government told us we had to. I remember sitting in a Taco Bell 3-4 days before I started, I guess it would have been 4 days because it was a Wednesday night, with my friends talking about the NBA season closing. And remember that I started quarantining about a week before everybody else was, and a couple weeks before Governor Ivey issued a stay-at-home order. But, I'm probably not indicative of the average citizen. But if you had the NBA canceling its season that night when we were talking about it, before all of this started, before the quarantines, before the stay-at-home orders, and then that also happened with the NCAA tournament, Major League Baseball, you saw concerts getting canceled, all these major events started getting canceled, and then what you saw is businesses starting to operate under different hours. You started to see churches starting at least talking about moving to live streaming or a drive-in service or something of that nature, and then they started rolling back even that. And this all happened before anybody was mandated to. And so it's interesting that the government wound up following the lead of the people, not the other way around. And so I think what's going to happen is that you're going to see the exact same thing in reverse. That when people get ready to come out of their homes, when they believe that the risk versus the reward, the reward being either them getting out or making money or whatever their incentive for leaving the home is, and not quarantining where they are now, whenever that takes place, people will do it. And they're going to do it whether the government likes it or not. That isn't necessarily true in China, where they'll just cement you into your house, like literally put a cement block in front of your door to where you can't leave. But here, it's different. And so I think what is going to eventually happen, and the way that we're going to get out of this, is when people are thoroughly convinced that the risk no longer outweighs the potential reward, whether that's something as tangible as going out and making money, or something as intangible as just wanting to see their buddies, wanting to hang out with their family, all of those things. So we're dealing with a two-sided equation here, risk and reward. And right now, the feeling is, because of the big, bad, scary coronavirus, and I'm not making fun of that, I'm saying that this is legitimately how people feel, and there's some justification for it, is you've got on this side, your risk is a lot higher than your potential reward. Once the average person starts feeling that that reward is increasing and that risk is starting to decrease, once the scientists and the doctors start saying it's safer than we thought it was, or they start seeing that the death rate or the cases are not really as bad as they thought it were, or we start seeing a decrease in things like deaths and hospitalizations, then people are going to start to feel that that risk is lowering, and the incentive for that reward could go up. Because if you've been out of work a month and you're not making money and you're worried about whether or not you're going to be able to feed your kids this next month, all of a sudden that reward starts to increase. And so when the reward and increase start to level off and you start seeing reward just kind of sneak ahead of risk, at least for some people, then you're going to get the economy rolling again. And this is really all going to happen regardless of what the government thinks about it. I tend to believe that what's going to happen is you're going to have at least a large plurality, if not a majority, of the average citizen going out, working, resuming their normal life before the government tells them that it's okay, because that's how it tends to work in America. Because let's just say, for the sake of argument, that here in the city of Montgomery, which has enacted a number of stupid and draconian curfew laws and all these other things, if a few people break it, then the police are going to enforce it. And through no fault of the police, let's say that maybe even just 10% of the city decided to ignore it. Just 10,000, 20,000 people. You really think that the Montgomery City Police Department or the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, or the same thing for Prattville and Autauga or Wetumpka and Elmore, do you really think that if 10-ish% of the population just starts going out when they want to, that they're going to enforce that? No, that's impossible. They would not have the cell capacity to enforce that. They wouldn't be able to write enough tickets. And so ultimately what is going to happen, and I'm not encouraging people to do this, don't misread me, I'm just saying that once that happens, I believe that what you are eventually going to see is that when people start making that risk versus reward evaluation and reward starts winning out over risk, that you are going to, and I don't even think it's going to be all that slowly, but you are going to gradually see more and more people do that, to the point to where the government says, yeah, we're not going to be able to enforce this. We might as well go ahead and take the law off the books. I think that's the most likely scenario. I think that we as the people decide when all of this is going to be over, not the government. And frankly, I think that's the way that it should be. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the church live stream. I'm going to go ahead because Dalraida Church of Christ has already started that. By the way, if you are at home and you want to engage in a really enlightening Bible study, Dalraida looks like they just went live a few minutes ago, so they're going to be live. You can listen to Doug's lesson on the patriarchs. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he said that this week's lesson is going to be on Abraham, so I'm very much looking forward to that. I love Abraham. We also have several other really good resources if you want to do a Bible study. We have Jeremy Pate's Burnout series, where he's talking about Elijah. John Kackelman and Billy Camp, who is really involved here at Faulkner, they are doing a series right now on sort of biblical authority and the reliability of the scripture. So I highly encourage you to look at those. Really great resources, a myriad of different ones. And of course, if you ever want to have a Bible study with me and sort of look at some of the things that I'm doing, that's all available at Tactics Radio's YouTube channel. So if you do want to do that, if you want to have some kind of level of connectedness, there's easy ways to do that, and those are available. You can check out either my YouTube channel or Dalraida Church of Christ YouTube channel, and they'll be able to help you out with that. In the meantime, stay the course, friends. Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media or our business partners. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Video production by Jackson Dean. Broadcast studio provided by Faulkner University. Location studio provided by the Dalraida